for so many content creators, people that are, getting their feet wet in the content creation world, or even people that have been doing content online for a while, it can feel like we aren't worthy of putting ourselves out there or carving out a little corner of the internet that's just for us because we haven't achieved something yet, or we're not where someone else is yet, versus having excitement, interest in simply expressing ourselves. And I think that's where the creator wound really comes in, is like we don't feel like it's allowed to simply express ourselves, especially if we're not good enough yet.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Lost and Found, a podcast that explores the creative relationship between our inner and outer worlds. It's a creative exploration through stories, insights, resources, and tools to help you intentionally design your life and work. I'm your host, Brooke Eston, also known as the Creative Amplifier. I'm part strategist, part designer, part coach, and part artist. And I'm dedicated to helping fellow creatives bridge the gaps between those big dreams and practical realities. Now let's get into it. Today, we have an extra special guest to welcome to the podcast. Her name is Amanda Bucci. She is an influencer, a business consultant, an energy and alignment coach, and the founder of the Entrepreneurial Archetype Quiz. People come knocking down Amanda's door for many reasons, but primarily due to her experience and expertise in the convergence between business, personal branding, emotional intelligence, and transformational healing. At the time of this recording, Amanda had close to 470,000 Instagram followers. Millions of people around the world are seeing her content every day. Amanda's method is informed by her certifications in spiritual psychology and trauma-informed life coaching. This is blended with practical, growth-oriented business strategy and systems thinking. Oftentimes, this comes in the format of quick, easy, bite-sized pieces of content because Amanda is a master content creator. Whether it's through her private coaching, in-person retreats, group coaching containers, digital courses, or her new book, Followed, The Content Creator's Guide to Being Seen, Facing Judgment, and Building a Thriving Digital Brand, Amanda is the go-to coach for those looking to step into growth, leadership, visibility, and authentic fulfillment in their work. Our conversation today was wide-ranging. We covered a lot of ground, but we focused primarily on the relationship between creativity, business, and personal growth while using the tool of social media as part of your toolkit for self-actualization. A totally different spin, a totally different angle, and I love absolutely every moment of this conversation. So I really hope that you get a chance to enjoy this podcast as much as we did. Without further ado, here's Amanda Bucci. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. So the catalyst for us connecting was you put a call out on your social media. I am one of, I think, somewhere between 400 and 500,000 followers. And I saw your generous offer to connect with people who had podcasts to be able to have a conversation around your new book, which is called, would you like
Followed.
to share?
Called Followed, and the subtitle is The Content Creator's Guide to Being Seen, Facing Judgment, and Building an Authentic Personal Brand.
Beautiful. Although your space is around the content creation and historically from the fitness angle, and then moving into business and expanding even more recently into spirituality and relationships and a whole number of things that fall under those categories, you speak in the book quite significantly about your relationship to your creativity. And a lot of people tend to have, from my perspective, a limited and complicated view of their relationship with creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Either they believe that it only exists in the context of fine arts or a professional create, which, is skill-based. It's something you actually have to put time into learning how to play an instrument, how to dance, how to paint, how to draw. But people believe that there are creatives and then there's everybody else. And what I really appreciated about your book is the way you start the book in talking about our need for ownership around all parts of ourselves. And then you guide us in navigating different approaches to expressing that in a way that allows us to essentially self-actualize. So from the perspective of creativity, you share about this concept of a wounded creative or the creative wound. Yeah. And it's something that I think every single one of us can relate to. And I would love to invite you to share a little bit about what that is and also what your early experience with that wounding was.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very specific experience with my own creativity growing up. I have this funny memory in high school where I went to nursing school for college, and I actually tested out. I did AP writing in high school, and I never took any writing classes in college. Not one. No writing classes, no creative classes. It was all science-based. And I had some sort of creative stuff in high school, but I didn't exactly feel like it was me. And I have this funny memory I remember I was like sitting in history class. I don't remember exactly what was happening, but I remember thinking in my head, oh, I just don't have that creative part of me. It's not there.
Yeah.
Literally don't have it. And now I'm a professional creator, and my whole work is surrounded by my creativity. I even created a entrepreneurial archetype quiz where I had this recognition of different patterns and different content creators and coaches and service providers and entrepreneurs that I worked with, and recognized that there are different energies that we all embody and different archetypes in different capacities. Like we all strengthen them in different ways. We have like a natural inclination towards some of them in different ways. And for me, my content creation was always surrounded by my creativity. It was always, everything else was always in service to my creative expression. My business was always in service to my creative expression. My coaching work was always in service to my creative expression. And those things are amazing and important in their own way, but the creative expression was always at the top for me. So it's funny. I remember always drawing as a kid, like all the time, constantly drawing things. I was very connected to the ocean. I'm like a water sign, air sign through and through. So I'm like a Cancer, Libra, Aquarius, and I've just got almost all water and air in my chart. I've got some earth, no fire. But, very, very connected to the water, the ocean, nature. And I also was a singer in middle school. I did the choir, and I was in the choir in my church. And I remember going to this singing competition for middle schoolers, where they had you go in a room with like 4 adults and do the song that you rehearsed and sing it in front of them, and you would get a grade. And I remember getting like a C on that. And I was like, I guess I'm just not a singer. I'm not good enough. I'm mediocre. Like I got graded on this thing that was just fun for me. And then it no longer became fun for me. So this wounding around, creativity being this thing that gets applied to the capitalistic kind of achievement-based value structure that we all agree to is so, it's not totally wrong for everybody, but for most people, creativity is just a deeply inherent part of how we express ourselves, know ourselves, find ourselves, see ourselves, experience ourselves. And that flow, having that seamless connection to that flow, is something that can get cut off so early when we apply this like achievement value-based energy to our creativity. Because our creativity is just as who we are, as breathing is, or as eating or whatever. It's just so naturally there. We often don't even recognize it. So in the book I write about, for so many content creators, people that are, getting their feet wet in the content creation world, or even people that have been doing content online for a while, it can feel like we aren't worthy of putting ourselves out there or carving out a little corner of the internet that's just for us because we haven't achieved something yet, or we're not where someone else is yet, versus having excitement, interest in simply expressing ourselves. And I think that's where the creator wound really comes in, is like we don't feel like it's allowed to simply express ourselves, especially if we're not good enough yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I found that to be a really important part of the issue as well, which is this concept of skills, right?
Yeah.
Because we are creative in our energetic makeup, every single one of us. Creativity is a characteristic of our species. But the dual problem that I've witnessed, that I think you're speaking beautifully to, and even more so in the book, because you go into much more depth in it, is this concept of creativity for ourselves versus performative creativity.
Yeah.
And
100%.
the sort of model that I like to think about is the professional artist versus the art therapy patient or the art therapist. Because and I studied this a little bit. I'm a therapeutic art coach. So I use the process of creativity as a tool for healing and personal evolution. And the major difference that I've seen is this concept of art therapy is about the process and the outcome is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Right. Versus the professional artist, where the process is not actually that relevant. It's more the outcome. Do people like the outcome? Yes. So what I love about the way that you've positioned this particular topic of the book is that you speak about creativity and creating content from this perspective of it being a tool for self-actualization. But at the same time, you speak a lot about judgment and criticism and haters and all of the things that we are all terrified of, because we all have that creative wound. We all have somebody telling us, in your case, you're average. C is like, okay, not that special, not that bad. But even that was painful enough for you to separate from that part of yourself. So I think it's so fascinating how those two play together. And as somebody who has had such a public evolution, can you speak a little bit to how your creativity shows up, or where the difference perhaps is around when it is serving you, just for you, where the outcome doesn't matter, and then where that starts to blend over into a shared value experience?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a lot of what you're saying. The difference between like the art therapy and then the creative professional. I feel like content creators and entrepreneurs land in the middle of that in a lot of ways, because, I think that a lot of people start social media, I know myself anyway, where it was so art therapy. It was so expressive. I got to connect with people that I never connected with before. I got to find community. I started my journey on YouTube, where I was making these vlogs every single day and sharing my fitness journey. And it was so therapeutic and so lovely and beautiful to just express myself through this medium. I loved editing the videos. I loved finding a song that matched with my workout thing that I edited. And it was just like such a fun time to do that and take pictures and do photography and edit those pictures and like write things. And it was so just innocently creative and beautiful. Yeah. And then over time, I was like, okay, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to grow this business, scale this business. Okay, now I had a point where I got really burnt out, and a lot of my creative energy was being used in marketing material and like that much more structured way of using your mind with, having a level of specificity, editing, like refining the craft, but also it was no longer this free-flowing, easy thing that I could pour my creative energy into something that was just, just for me. It was like to serve a mission, a bigger purpose. It was for other people. It was not necessarily just my own anymore. So I think content creators really have a lot of work to navigate with creativity as content creators, because it really is all three. It's for a bigger mission, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs solve problems, businesses are set up to solve problems. And then there's going to be, if you work with clients or if you sell things to people, you're going to be creating for them. That's also for you at the same time. But we all have to find that balance of using language that speaks in their language and also language that speaks in our language, or content that's coming from the depths of our soul, but is also going to resonate with the people that you're trying to resonate with. And then there's going to be, the purely creative elements that I think we all need to find our way back to as much as possible. I know for me, I'm such a thinker, I'm such a writer. I love creating. And if I don't get creative stuff out there that's just for me, that has like no outcome attached to it, I can find my stress levels increase a lot. I can find myself just feeling a little disconnected, a little restless. So I love having enough space in my week and my day and my process to just get what feels right to me out, because I do feel really connected to my creativity, and it feels really important for me to keep having like access to that space. And then also using a lot of that energy, like for example, writing a book, so much creative energy. It's also like really high intention creative energy. It's like refinement, mastery, editing, organizing. It's going to be both the flow and the structure, and it's really making something masterful that you can put out there and like it lives for a very long time. And I think that is a different kind of creativity than your daily Instagram post, for example. That can just be like coming from your heart and soul, and you tell a story. So I think everyone has their own skill building and, resilience to build inside of themselves to maintain a strong connection to their creativity. So you can keep having enough of it to both serve a bigger mission and also to support yourself and your own self-expression.
Yeah. So how did it get to the point where you felt that it was time for you to write your book?
Yeah, great question. I remember having the idea for the book, and I didn't entirely understand it at the time. It wasn't super clear, but it also wasn't this like practical decision of, oh, the next step in my journey is to write a book. It was a highly creative experience. It was a highly like soul connected experience. And I was also in the middle of my burnout in my business at the time, and that was a highly like creative catalyst time for me, because it was one of those experiences where, I went a little too far into putting things on my plate and like not being connected to that part of myself nearly as much. And I had to pull back, reevaluate my priorities and my values. And that was one of the times that I really decided that my connection to my creativity and having space for that was so deeply important to me. So whatever I could do to protect that, I would do.
Yeah.
And the book was one of the ideas that came through from that time. So, I remember just wanting to have my process with it be the process. However long it took, whatever I needed to do, whatever support I could find, I would find that for this book. And I knew it was going to be something that also served a lot of people and helped a lot of people. And I also knew that it was going to help me a lot, in terms of growth and stuff, but I really couldn't be connected to the outcome. It was both. I knew that it was going to have a great outcome eventually, but it was this like therapeutic growth experience where everything that I wrote about it was this opportunity to more fully integrate and embody the thing that I was saying and really crystallize what it was that I had gained in terms of experience and wisdom and information in this topic over, the almost decade that I've been a content creator. Yeah. So coming into this place where I felt ready to write the book, it was ultimately me following my intuitive journey. It was ultimately this kind of recognition that I was at a point in my journey where I had done multiple things and I've embodied different versions and parts of the journey as a content creator, that I could kind of look back on the hero's journey of my own life and see that there were in fact steps and there were in fact different parts of the process that I could really parse out and write to help people really understand their process as well. And I think that's kind of what happens when you have an idea for a book. It's this recognition that you've been through some stuff and you've got some stuff to say, and you can organize it well for people, and it can turn into this like living, breathing thing that people can have on their coffee table and get support for years to come.
Yeah. How does it feel to be committed to a creative product that ultimately you can't control? And what I mean by that specifically is with social media. Yes, we know that everything that's on the internet, like it stays on the internet, but we also know you can shut down your social media account. You can remove a post. You can edit a caption. You can, put something on top of that to kind of distract from what that is. Like you have a lot of freedom and flexibility in that space. And there is a lot that's in your control. Once you submit your manuscript and it's a real thing and it's out there, it's outside of what you can control, and it lives, like your book will live longer than your body. Your book is part of your legacy, and putting that out there in a way that you sort of surrender it to its own journey and its own process. What is that experience like for you, especially considering the context that you come from with so much social media content or your own digital products, which you can pull at any moment if you change your mind?
Yeah. I have 3 things to say about that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will resonate with the first one. So the first thing that I had to really unpack with deciding to be committed and devoted to writing a book was that you get no validation for years. No short-term validation, like nothing, no responding back to like, oh, what you said really landed for me today. Like that short-term response and engagement that social media can provide. You don't get that. So what you have to do is you have to continue to trust that what you're saying is solid, and you're not getting that feedback of like, does this make sense for people? Does that make sense for people? And it really tests you in a way where it's just like, do you really know this? Like, is this really yours to own? And it gives you this opportunity to feel into what you own beyond how people respond to it. So that was a huge,
that hits.
Learning that hits. And it took a while, like the writing process is also you write and then you review and you're like, what the hell did I just write about? Like, did I even make my point? So you really have to land into it, but it's so cool when you complete something like that, because you can really own it and you can really be like, yep, I own everything that's in here because I've gone over and over it and over it. The second one is that I've heard a lot of authors talk about this experience that when you have a book out there, years later, you very often resent or cringe at your first book or your second book or whatever, because you've grown and maybe you evolve and your ideas change or whatever. And I really like my book and I feel really confident in it, but it is this scary thing to feel like, even perhaps we can have a analog of getting into a long-term relationship or getting married, where you're picking someone and you're devoting yourself to someone and you're committing yourself to someone, even if, and knowing and trusting that you're both going to evolve and change over time. You really have to surrender control to that, but you just have to choose. You have to choose the thing fully, which again is another opportunity for responsibility and ownership. And then the third metaphor I'll use is, I don't have a child yet, but I will. And I'm sure a lot of parents can probably resonate with, once you have a kid, you raise it, but they're ultimately their own person and you can't control them. You can do your absolute best to be a great guide and a great parent and to, support them in their own self-expression, but ultimately they're going to do their own thing. They're going to be a fully autonomous, sovereign adult at some point. So I'm imagining that it feels similar to have my name attached to something that other people will interact with and, make their own and have their own relationship with it. And whatever Amazon reviews. Some of them will probably be bad and like this person sucks and this book sucks or whatever. And then a lot of them will probably be great. And I can't control that anymore. It's totally out of my hands now. All I can do, and I say this regularly about the things that you create, is to do your due diligence to help them thrive as best they possibly can with everything that is in your control. So my process for this book will really be to do it's like respectable due diligence to support it in thriving and getting found and getting seen, and you know, creating it with like the best tools and support that I possibly could.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, and that hits. Like those metaphors hit. I feel that in my body as you were sharing. You speak about this concept of being a content creator, especially on a large scale where you have a lot of eyeballs, you know, and opinions in your direction. One of the other things that, from my perspective, is how I came across you, that you're becoming more and more associated with, is as being somewhat of a pioneer in the non-traditional relationship space. And as someone who has shared openly online about your journey, you shared that this is really an entry point into this exploration for you. It's not like you've had, you know, dozens of polyamorous relationships prior to the relationship you're in now. And since entering that space, since coming out online as this, you know, expressing this part of you, I'm very curious about how you navigated that as a sort of newbie to the space without letting other people's judgments infiltrate your own intuition. Like, how did you separate your compass from other people saying, no, go over here. No, you shouldn't be there. No, you should do this. Like, how did you separate your own internal dialogue from the dialogue that was coming at you in such a public and vocal way?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And something that I talk to people a lot about is that moment when you're going to share something scary, and when to know when it's okay to share something scary. Because a lot of people have, like, you know, real, whether it's big T or little t trauma about when they share something and then, you know, they get ostracized or judged or criticized or canceled or just, you know, removed from their community in really intense ways that can be really hurtful. And I talk about, for myself, that first time that I posted about being in a polyamorous relationship 3.5 years ago now. I think I was a year or so into my relationship with John, my now husband. And I remember absolutely having still so many questions for myself. I had some answers and so much that I knew I was a student and I didn't know. And I knew that I was going to be going on a journey and doing a bunch of stuff that I've never done and finding myself. And what I had to do before I decided to officially post was I had to come to terms with the fact that there was going to be a lot of judgment, and I could be okay with all the people having questions because I was owning the fact that I still had questions. I was owning my studenthood in a way and not coming across as if I had all the answers. And I did, like, the first post that we made, there's still like 1,000 comments on it. And it's wild to read through, like the amount, just kind of like those coffee conversations you have. Just imagine people having them in a comment section, but like not really having any kind of decency or like, you know, thoughtfulness of how they were going to communicate something like, I hope your marriage blows up in your face, or like, this is never going to work. And it's like, how many monogamous relationships break up? And, you know, having even that kind of idea of people watching my relationship with John and waiting for it to end and then being able to point the finger and see, like, see, poly doesn't work, and having that whole kind of thing in the background. So something that I think is a huge key here is, number one, knowing that you're going to have questions within yourself that any kind of comment is going to trigger. It's going to bring up all of those places where you still are questioning yourself. But that happens in every area of life. anything that you're triggered by, you're still questioning or working with it within yourself. It's a wound, or it's a shadow, or it's something within your ego, or it's something you're scared of. That's how every single relationship is like. Any of those little triggers we have is something that we have not fully owned inside at the end of the day. So I had that awareness, and I also just decided for myself I was going to go slow, and I wasn't going to act like I had all the answers, and I was going to be in my process and own what I could when I could, and know that it's still this like very new thing for a lot of people. You know, the people that I know that are in poly and open relationships, like, just talk to each other a lot. We're like, there's no handbook for this. Like, no one's teaching us how to do this, and we all have to teach each other. And it's very weird. And there's books, but no one can really prepare you for not just the theory, but the practice.
Yeah.
The practice is very different from the theory, if you could understand that. So preparing to come out that you are poly is kind of, I'm assuming, similar to coming out as queer, 20 years ago. Probably still dangerous in a lot of ways for a lot of people. I'm in a heteronormative presenting relationship, and I'm white and privileged and all of these things that, protect me from too much harm and damage in society. Like, I don't have as many factors that would create a much more dangerous situation for me than it would for someone who's trans or non-binary, or in a homo presenting relationship or anything like that. So there's a lot, I think, that people have to take into consideration when it comes to facing criticism and judgment, because we all do have very, very real world concerns for what could possibly happen if we speak our truth and we share who we really are. And that's going to be everyone's personal journey into when they feel safe within themselves to share things and to own things. And that's really what the book is about as well. And, you don't owe anybody your experience until you feel ready to share it. And you might not ever feel ready, and that's okay too. But again, that's going to be everyone's personal journey with when they feel comfortable to share, what they feel comfortable sharing with. And that's, within your own discernment. But coming back to yourself as regularly as you can, and really cutting out the noise of what's mine and what's other people's, is really this process of checking in of, where am I feeling triggered within myself? Where am I feeling confused because I'm hearing this voice over here? And you can even ask yourself, like, okay, whose voice is that? Is that my mom's voice? Is that my principal's voice from 6th grade? Is that the voice of someone on Reddit who's talking shit about me? And you can really kind of notice that if you get quiet and you sit with yourself, of whose voice is that? And you can often recognize, like, that's not really mine. It's one that I feel really present when I start to share what's happening inside of me, outside of me.
Yeah. That's actually two of the things that you said there that I really appreciate about the book is, first, that you acknowledge your privilege.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's clear that you've done your work to be able to understand that your vantage point looking at these issues incorporates the privilege that you inherently have. And then the other thing that is really helpful about the book is there is a grand difference between the theory of something and the practice of it. So we can talk endlessly about theory without actually having to show up and do the work. But in the book, it's peppered with these exercises, these prompts, these experiential, almost embodiment practices, so that you can step away from the noise and explore and investigate what needs to be excavated from inside you. Like, you prompt people to go into their own internal swampy places and search for the nuggets of wisdom in that swamp. And nobody wants to do that. Like, that's gross and scary and hard and disorienting and, brings up all of the things. But I think a really important part of what I have gotten from your work is that you're essentially saying you can only go so far if you don't do this work. But you also don't speak about that out of context of you're running a business and you have an audience and there is a different kind of relationship there. This is not just your self-expression platform. This is your relationship platform in which your self-expression is part of that relationship.
Yeah. And I think that, I think it's really important that creators communicate the context of where they're coming from. Like, I think that it's so important that we all share our voices. And I love that about social media. I love that you can get almost anything from anyone that is very specific to your needs online now. Like, I think it's so, like, the amount of important I feel it is so high. Like, there's so many things I think we would have never known about ourselves had social media not come into place, because all of our creators are these like archetypes for different models of being that we can mirror and see mirrored within ourselves. So it really is a relationship with the self in so many ways. And also, I think 2020 provided a lot of opportunity for people to not hide their context anymore. So we could be more honest and transparent and take more responsibility for like, hey, this is my context. This is my vantage point. These are my privileges that I come along with. And like, that's how can affect what I'm saying to you. So you can just have better discernment and, not pedestalize people as much because they have different perspectives that they're coming from at the end of the day. And if we can have more communication and clarity and openness and transparency about why we have our perspective and where it's coming from, I think that frees a lot of people and it makes this relationship between creators and consumers a lot more seamless.
Yeah. In doing that, in showing up authentically online in a way that reveals the parts that we have hid because we don't want to be seen in that way, I feel like there is the dilemma that pops up, especially if you're doing it in the context of your business. And I know I feel this, that I have to present or show up in a way that shows the best version of me, which is not necessarily inauthentic. It is me, but in order to be a leader or a respected expert or a professional, so many of us have this kind of association with that we need to have it all together. We don't want our flaws to be visible. We don't want the ends to be like the frayed ends to be visible. So how do you decipher what is appropriate to share versus what's not when you're coming from the perspective of being a business owner or a professional where other people would want to hire you to guide them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I feel like I am not always grappling with that, but there is always this interesting experience of having a real human experience, going through stuff, having, your own challenges, and then having a platform where you help people, you guide people, you lead people. And there does need to be a balance of what you share about your process and your experience. I think that there's plenty of models and perspectives and contexts that you don't have to share your personal process with people as a business owner. I know so many awesome business owners that I follow and I love their stuff. They don't really share their personal experience that much. And I don't think it's inauthentic at all. I think it's just the way that they're choosing to do it. And that's great. And I don't think that we need or should be entitled to or expect creators and business owners to share their vulnerability just so we can know that they're a human being. I think that as consumers, we just have to understand that people are humans and we're not entitled to know everything about what's going on with them or, why they're not showing up or why they took a social media break or why they're sharing something. And I also think that there's a lot of value in sharing story. I think if you're a person that has decided and you feel authentic with helping other people release their shame around a topic that, you're going through and a lot of other people are probably going through, I think that, you sharing your experiences and the things that you're navigating, that if that feels authentic to you, then do it. There's also going to be, that other layer of discernment around when and how.
Yeah.
And, for my process, I have really found that like the when has to be from this place of me being grounded in my process. And that doesn't necessarily mean being fully healed or being fully, complete with the process. It means really discerning like from what place within myself am I sharing this experience of mine, and
Yeah.
what am I looking to get out of it, and how will it land with other people. And there's got to be, for every business owner, entrepreneur, coach, podcaster, content creator, speaker, there's always going to be that personal process of, sitting with how you feel about your own share and sitting with how you feel about yourself at the end of the day, thinking about the place from which you're actually sharing and when it feels right for you to share. Will be a constant process of intuition and discernment, and also just checking in with your brand and the reason that you have your brand and the message that you're trying to send to your community. It really is considering, what is this relationship that I have to this community and to these people, and letting go of expectations of what you think you're supposed to do with your community, and really being thoughtful about what you want to do in terms of your relationship with your community.
Yeah. Going a little bit deeper into that relational piece, I think it would be helpful to explore the biggest fear that I would say all of us have of showing up online. And that's something that you have actually experienced and gone through. And so the way that I want to phrase this is really around, right? The big fear is that we get canceled, right? And what triggers a cancel? Usually we said something that unintentionally hurt somebody. It was not our intention. It was not the thing that we came to do, but it either came from a place of just ignorance and not realizing that there's that other angle, or it just comes from a place of hate, right? Just a fundamental, like, I understand it and I don't like it and I'm going to tell you why, right?
Right.
So when you go through that experience, that is the terror of everyone, right? Because that plays to that primal fear of being rejected by the tribe. And that primal fear is death. If you were rejected by the tribe, like, you're as good as gone. It's slow, lonely, and painful to go out there and live the rest of your life. So having had that experience, the worst case scenario happened. You were misunderstood. People were upset. There's two parts to my question. One is, I'm curious, what was that experience like for you personally in the context of your own mind and your own body and your own home and your like intimate own experience? And then how did you come to a place that you were able to respond as thoughtfully as you did? Because at least the way I interpreted the responses that I saw from you online was that you owned that there was something in a blind spot, and that you were appreciative that it got brought into the light so that you could change your relationship with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I love this conversation because it really does just represent that the relationship you have with your social media audience and the people online is really the tools and the process for moving through relationship struggles is really the same, except it's just in a bigger context, and it's sometimes higher stakes because there's reputation involved, there's business involved, there's, you could do and trigger harm in that experience within a lot of people. And the process, though, is really the same as any conflict resolution process you would go through with an individual. So I've gone through a few, like one kind of big cancellation experience when I was 23. I had a friend of mine that was doing a webinar on how to heal your relationship with food. And there was some language on his website that a lot of people that have struggled with their relationship with food felt problematic. And I didn't have the awareness, and I was ignorant to some of that language. And, in partnering with him, a lot of people felt like there was a lot of harm being done in that process. And again, I was young, had a blind spot, didn't know. But that was the biggest one for me. And it was also the most impactful to my nervous system and to my experience. The thing that, first and foremost, you asked how I felt. It felt like the worst kind of fear-based energy you can experience. I felt like this like gut punch, and I felt like I just wanted to hide in a hole and like not exist and not be seen and just not feel all of those eyeballs on me. Like it's very, very, very intense to feel that many eyeballs on you criticizing you and kind of like, parsing out like your character and the reasons why you're doing things, and also not really having the real opportunity to explain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the people that do explain themselves and to kind of like make it into a conversation, there's so much bravery there. And I think that there can be a lot of opportunity for ownership and then, having deeper conversations about it. But as a person that was younger, I ended up having conversations about it later, but I really struggled in the moment to not just feel like it was too much, too overwhelming. Just too much for me. I remember having this like huge bean bag in my apartment with this little corner, and John wasn't home at the time, and I was watching the 100, the show. I forget what streaming network is on, but I remember watching that show and just like hiding under a blanket, and I just like didn't want to go on social media. But that same weekend, I was in this mastermind where a bunch of people from across the country gathered, and we did this business mastermind. So I did have a lot of community support, which was key, which is so helpful.
Yeah.
And when you go through something like that, again, like you said, the primal fear of being exiled from the tribe is so deep because it is really not safe for your survival to not have any friends or connections or to have a tribe or a community. It's not how we're designed. So having community during that time, people that can see the bigger picture, people that, understood my character and my heart and were able to support me in coming back to myself and having that co-regulation experience with other people, finding ways to regulate my own nervous system. Because ultimately, what you got to do is you got to find some way to take responsibility, apologize for having a blind spot. Don't take over responsibility for anything that isn't yours to take responsibility for. Everyone's got to figure out their own process with how people respond in conflict. There's so much I can say about conflict resolution. That chapter specifically is the longest chapter in the book. I'm pretty sure it was like an 8,000 word chapter. There's a lot to say.
So valuable. It was, and it was so beautifully written. I really appreciated the lens you put on that.
Yeah, I took a lot of time on that one because I knew it was, going to be one of the more, touchy, spiky ones that it's difficult to navigate conflict with people because we often interpret how someone responds. Like I remember on social media, a lot of what you'll get is like, why are you deleting comments? You must be hiding something. You're silencing people's voices. Like if you got on social media, you signed up for this. And the answer is like, no, I didn't sign up to be harassed. I didn't sign up to be put in a position where I can't defend myself. I didn't sign up to be unfairly judged and mistreated without having like this kind of fair conversation where we're both in a place where we're vulnerable and like, there was a mistake that can get made. Like we're not in that kind of relationship. That's not the relationship that we have. So I really tried to outline in the book, like, what is the relationship that we have with people online and what can we really expect from each other? Because we don't have intimate, vulnerable, safe relationships with everybody that follows us because we don't know them and they only know a version of us at the end of the day. And there's also a power dynamic at play with people that have a bigger following or any kind of following, because anyone that has a platform, especially now that you can buy verified checks, people listen to you more and there's more of an authority there. So there's got to be a lot of responsibility taken, but we also have to figure out when we shouldn't take over responsibility. So I outline it's a discernment, but I do outline in the book very specifically like what to say, what to do if you ever go through that, like how to process it on a personal level and also how to process it with your community.
Yeah. I think that was one of the most valuable little nuggets that I took from it, because like everyone, I have that fear too. right? I did a podcast thinking I wasn't going to have to show my face. And then Spotify went, I use Spotify. So now it's like, oh, great, we are showing the face, but there's more spaciousness, which makes me feel more comfortable than the bite size, which probably more people will see. But the people who are willing to listen to an hour-long podcast, I feel safer in those contexts than in that sort of quick hit. So I understand the value of skilling up in the one-to-many space in a way that can be, you can disseminate wisdom and knowledge and inspiration in the format that is most consumable for people, right? Who's going to listen to more than one hour podcast a day? But people are seeing thousands of posts per day, potentially even per hour. So I understand that need, and I think so many of us do, but there is that resistance that comes in that is so terrifying that it creates this paralysis. And what I think is so special and unique about the way that you have shifted your brand and you're continuing to evolve is really around this concept of, how do I articulate this? But it's not either or. It's not all or nothing. It is this blended, relational, complex perspective, right? That there is a give and take in every single piece of this. What you're able to give and the relationships that you're able to build can be just so life affirming and so energizing and so inspiring and so love filled. But also in that same space, you risk, getting that hate and getting that energy put at you. And I think, as you described in the book, really understanding and making a decision for yourself, whose opinions matter, who gets to enter into that intimate space where you're willing to really consider that perspective.
Right.
And what you said in the book also had a lot to do with delivery, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody clearly is not interested in seeing your vantage point, then that is an opportunity perhaps to say, okay, you're not you don't make it into the cut of people who is worth really engaging with.
Yeah, absolutely. And even at the end of the chapter, I wrote and sometimes you got to just tell people to fuck off.
Yep.
That's where we have to do in life as well. It's like, I literally can't listen to you. Like, we're not on the same page. We're never going to be. You don't want to be. I don't want to be. Go live your life.
Yeah.
But with the thing that social media does is so beautiful. It can be overwhelming, obviously, to have so many sounds and perspectives and opinions coming in, especially if you're a creator and you put a lot of stuff out there. But when you get feedback like that, it's helpful in so many ways. It helps you just kind of recognize, how does someone else view this? And am I missing something? Is there a perspective that I can add to what I say that would actually be really helpful? And that's literally how we help each other. That's the whole point of society, is to support each other and refining ideas and making sure that, this perspective doesn't get lost in this conversation. And of course, I think in everyone's process, everyone's creative process, everyone's social media process, their business process, you really do have to take some time to reconnect to yourself and to have that solitude and to even take social media breaks, because you have to listen to your own inner voice the most at the end of the day. And social media is a relationship with so many people and so many voices, and it's a lot, and it can be too much. It can truly, truly be too much. So I think we all have to be in that process of, how can I consume and engage with people in a way where I'm learning and growing and it's helping and supporting me and the bigger mission and everybody else? And where am I overextending myself in terms of even just consuming or engaging or serving or creating, or I'm lost on myself? And you're going to feel that. And really the whole goal is to return to the basics, return, from the beginning of this podcast, go draw, go paint, go sing, go reconnect to your, your core nature and your core energy, and then go back and create and serve and give.
Yeah. And perhaps even give yourself a break from all of that noise, because when you're in the present doing something creative, it keeps you in the present, right? And the suffering comes from ruminating over something in the past or projecting something that's going to be hard in the future. But if you are able to stay present, you're okay in the moment.
Yeah.
And reminding yourself and your nervous system that we're okay can help to recalibrate that energy in a really powerful way.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Creates more safety.
You share in the book that you thought that you were an introvert and that making new friendships or, entering into that space was something that was particularly challenging for you. And so you leaned more on the online avenue to start to facilitate that intimacy. And I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about how your relationships, even your intimate relationships with people, not the one-to-many, but the one-to-one relationships that are purely virtual versus the relationships you have with people that seem like you just shared about your wedding recently, which is a huge social event. And it appeared that you had so many incredible people that loved and supported and championed you in this particular journey, that I wanted to know if you could share a little bit about how you relate to people and if there's a difference between your sort of core in real life people and your core digital relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the core relationships that you build and you find are really built when you start to deeply connect with yourself and you see yourself more clearly. And that story about being more introverted is during a time that I was not fully aware that I had a people-pleasing wound, and I would fawn and mirror people a lot and not know me, and it would drain my energy, and I just wasn't aware of all of that. So I gravitated towards more alone time and solitude because that's when I felt like I could be myself. And I didn't know how to do that around a lot of people just yet. So over time, the more that I have connected with myself, I've witnessed and seen who I am and owned all of that. I've found other people that met me. And they're like, I see you here. I respect you here. I learn from you here. I like this. I want to help you nurture this. And I like the way that you help me nurture me as well. And those are where those relationships are the ones that are the most intimate and close because, not only do we see each other on a deep level and for all parts that are there, but there also can be a safety to explore the parts that are still not fully owned, or there's still shadow, there's still blind spots, there's still pain, there's still whatever. And that's what I think that the main difference is between like your core inner circle and then people that and have acquaintanceships online and you're close with, that you might not know how they show up in conflict, or you might not know how they're talking about you behind the scenes. I think that the more close you get with people, there's that higher level of trust, but there's the higher ability to get hurt if the trust is broken. Like that's what love is, right? It's like I expand my heart to be seen, witnessed, and loved for all of who I am, and I do that for other people. And also that's scary because we're all still learning how to love all of who we are and like embrace all parts of us. Like it's difficult. So I think with social media, virtual relationships, I have plenty of people that I talk to online and I love and respect and appreciate them. And there's some people that I talk to online that, I process things with because we haven't met in person, but I know that they know other people in my life and there is some level of trust developed there. But I think that it's everyone's process to figure out like, how can I continue trusting this person, and like, where do I draw the line with my own trust, and which parts of myself am I unpacking with people? Like, where am I asking for support from people? Especially for the vulnerable parts, especially for the scary parts. And most people don't do that with anyone but their therapist, if they have one, hopefully, right? Not everyone even has one, so not everyone knows how to unpack different scary parts of themselves with other people. Most of us are just going throughout the world, with shadow and with vulnerable parts that we keep hidden even from ourselves. So, yeah, the wedding was really this representation of how many people we've both kind of gathered, that we meet each other in the bigness of who we are, and we learn and grow from each other, but we've also met each other in the difficult parts and the scary parts and the parts that have been vulnerable. And it really is a community of trust built on that space. And anybody else can kind of create that for themselves, but it's really going to be this like process of like individually connecting with people and opening yourself up, owning yourself, meeting other people, loving them the way that is going to help them thrive, and getting that reciprocated back to you. And you can totally start that online. It's just going to be a different energy, because you don't, there's going to be just like a different medium in how you connect and how you communicate and how you learn about each other.
Yeah. And how much gets revealed at what timeline.
Yes, exactly. And how safe you feel and how safe they feel. And it's going to be this back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I would love to bring it full circle and go back to your childhood, where you had that creative ability, and moving through middle school and high school and the choir experience and sort of shutting down that piece of yourself. I'm sure that there's been many other experiences similar to that since that initial kind of creative wound. But I would love to invite you to speak to a younger, more vulnerable, more insecure version of yourself, and share what you feel that you needed to hear in those moments to give a little bit of balm to the wound that was developing in that moment.
Yeah, I love that question. I think what I would say to her first and foremost is that her self-expression has nothing to do with a grade or how much she can achieve through it. It is something that helps her feel connected to herself, and to not stop, and to keep going, and to keep nurturing, and to keep learning so you can feel confident and good. But these 4 people don't know you, and it also has nothing to do with how good you are at age 12 at something. It's truly, this part of you is beautiful, and it's truly here to help you connect with yourself, and you're going to love nurturing it, and you'll always find your way back to it at the end of the day anyway. And just know that you do become a beautiful artist and a creator, and you will be nurturing this part of yourself for the rest of your life, because it will never want to run away from you.
If you were to have an opportunity to speak to somebody else who is in a similar situation, would you say anything different?
No, I feel like I would say, I would probably, if they were an adult, I would add a lot more around how they can continue to strengthen that muscle. And, I think I could say that to a younger person as well. But, there's going to be those affirmations and reminders of our power and the thing that makes us us. And those are being able to get reminded even all the time as an adult of, you, the way that you are, your expression is exactly perfect, and it's exactly you, and you don't have to change it for anybody, and you can keep nurturing it for yourself. And then also there's going to be the, here's how to tend to your heart and the pain and the wound that's here. And it might be difficult, but here's how you can keep working with it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And you share a lot about that in the book as well. So if somebody is feeling that and experiencing all of the feels, definitely check out the book for any number of reasons, but particularly for the perspective and vantage point that you're able to speak to and the practical resources that you include that help to allow us to develop those muscles that we need to be able to safely and authentically enter into that bigger arena. Thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how your journey continues to evolve. And I hope there will be an opportunity for us to continue to stay connected or reconnect in the future.
Yes, we will connect on the Instagram.
Yay. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, if you want any more information about any of our guests or the show notes or anything we discussed on today's episode, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.